People who work in an adult shop, what's the weirdest thing a customer has done? When I was 19, I worked for about 3 weeks at a rental store that didn't just have a back room, but a full-on adult shop in back that was bigger than the front of the store. If you wanted to rent Dumbo for your kid and buy an assortment of junk rings for yourself, we were your one-stop shop. One time, I had a guy come in to buy an electric pussy, about a $80 item. When I told him to have a nice evening, he responded very enthusiastically, "Oh, you bet I will." 3 hours later, he came back. He wanted to return the electric pussy because the box was missing the lube that was supposed to come with it. Since I'd only been there for about a week and a half, I didn't know how to do a return. So I had to use the inner-store phone to call the manager who was working the cash wrap in the front. She asked what was being returned, and when I told her it was an electric pussy, she said, "Okay, the first thing you need to do is inspect it to make sure it hasn't been used." What? Socially awkward 19-year-old me said. Yes, you have to inspect it to make sure it hasn't been used. So I had to open up the rubber pussy and inspect it for wear and tear in front of the guy, who was giving me an, "Are you damn kidding me?" look. Mercifully, it had not been used, and I gave him his refund. The worst part about it is that I was still a virgin at the time, so that was my first close encounter with a pussy. I told this story to a couple of friends of mine too, and became known to them as the electric gynecologist for a while. Story 2. Super long time ago. Worked overnight. Dude comes in, drunk. We chat for a while, where he works, etc., then grabs product and bolts. Except I knew where he worked. Probably a weird one for him when the popo showed up at his job for stealing sex toys. Bonus story. We worked off of commission. Seriously. So some dudes would come in and ask about different make, models of rubber dolls, etc., and I would get all anyway on how awesome the $500 rubber doll was. 19 years old me creeped on an area of awkward quasi-odd plastic pussy discussions. I wasn't sure if they were seriously interested in which Bonnie was the best or if the actual conversation we were having was a dirty thing for them. I was just trying to make my 15 precinct. That was an interesting job. Story 3. Had video rental rooms with a $20 deposit. Use the Kleenex, don't urinate in the trash can, you'll get your deposit back. Why we had the urination rule was bizarre to me. Then I had to tell a guy he wasn't getting his deposit back. Story 4. I worked in adult movie and sex toy shack for about a year. There were promos for staff to try and sell higher-end toys. If you sold a bunch, you got a bonus. We all had different sales tactics. There was one super fancy sex toy I was hyping up. I had one in the package. At the counter with a note saying, "Husband replacement unit." An old dad came in to get a stack of rentals. Thus, dating how long ago this was. Pops looked at the sign, took the toy, and placed it on the floor, arms on his sides, looking down at it. Well, it doesn't cut the damn grass, so I still have a job. Rentals on the house for a month. Such a perfect job for a slacker. Good times. Story 5. I'm not a sex toy shop employee, but I have the best story about sex toy shops. When I was in college, there was a sex toy shop near campus. We will call it Kevin's Adult Video. And it was in a seedy area of town, right by the intersection of 2 interstates and a Motel 6. I lived with an eclectic bunch of roommates, of which 2 were from India, and 1 was from the Middle East. My then boyfriend, now husband, suggests that we bring the bunch to Kevin's video. I asked, and to my surprise, they agreed to go. The girls from India wore hoodies so they could look down and cover their face and hair in case they recognized someone. The Middle Easterner wore her hijab, headscarf, so only her eyes were shown. Somewhere in between browsing the barely legal and luxury vibe sections, my man picked up some 3-foot-long, 5 inches in diameter sex toy and tucked it under his arm like a jousting rod whilst chasing all 3 women around the store, where the only thing you could see were their eyes getting bigger and bigger and their screams. The store clerk was laughing so hard he fell on the ground. Bonus additional inappropriate story time. I'm in a weird mood. When I was in college, I worked for a group home where women who had severe disabilities lived with other disabled women with 24-hour care. One Friday, I asked them what they wanted to do that evening, and one of the women replied, "I really want to see Thunder from Down Under," a male review. I nodded and explained to my new, inexperienced colleague that it was their decision, and since it was unanimous, we should go. The bank teller's eyes. When I rolled through the bank drive-thru with the giant handicapped van and asked for all ones, was pretty priceless, but I didn't care. Actually, I used my own money for tickets. And we rolled up. The women were ecstatic, putting dollar bills down strings, being shaken on their wheelchairs was super fantastic. So much booty. Then, I took them to a bar downtown where we would have shots. But it was always just mocktails that they were so thrilled about, and the bartenders always had a ton of fun coming up with new ones. We rounded out the night at a 2 a.m. run, at an Italian place that would puree their food at my request, luckily. And we were all exhausted and happy talking ad nauseum about the bachelorette party, which was actually way more fun than my own bachelorette party. I miss my girls every day. Story 6. I found a body in the preview booth my third shift at the shop. I saw the door was locked, but the customer wasn't paying for the movie space any longer. Get sex on the door. No answer. Grabbed the keys. The door was blocked. It was a huge man with overalls around his ankles lying pass on the floor. RIP. Story 7. My sister used to work at a classier adult shop. They got a lot of nurses in there from a nearby hospital, so they always got to hear raunchy cases that came into the air. My favorite one was this woman who wanted to try sex in different ways, but her boyfriend wasn't into the whole thing. She decided to try it herself and backed up onto a door. Yes, you read that correctly. Now picture a door and think very carefully about the role of a sphincter. She got stuck and called the fire department, who came down and cut a section of the door off. Apparently she was brought in, stomach down on a gurney, with part of the door attached, protruding from inside her to the ER. A few muscle relaxers and some lubrication later, and she was out of there. Story 8. I was 19 and worked at this shack-looking adult shop, sketch central of town, and if I didn't get free crap and paid to be there, I wouldn't be. One evening, I'm working with my buddy, and I can hear him talking to a familiar voice. It was a voice I tried recalling, but all I could recall was that it was someone of influence to me. Well, I automatically hide, thinking it might be my dad, and, well, it wasn't. It was my youth pastor from church. We locked eyes. My stomach drops. He goes pale and nope the duck out. Story 9. Not a sex toy shop, anything, but when I was younger, my mom worked for an Avon light company that sold sex toys and what all. I have a few fun stories from that. One day, my mom had to take my sister and I to one of the parties she was hosting at a woman's house. We got bored pretty quickly and started walking around the house while my mom explained various devices and products. I was creepily standing in the doorway to the room where the party was occurring, waiting for my mom to turn around so I could ask her if I could have some of the Rotel dip. I was probably 7 years old. One of the women sees me and goes bug-eyed. My mom asks her what's wrong and she points at me. My mom turns around holding a 3-foot-long double-headed sex toy and screams at me to leave. I did. 2. There was a numbing cream that came from this company called Like a Virgin that my mother used on us for tooth pain and various other things that needed topical anesthesia. At one point, I went to pick up some fast food with an old family friend who was talking about her friend getting a tattoo. I piped up and said, "My dad just got a tattoo." My mom put Like a Virgin on him before he went so it wouldn't hurt as bad. The family friend was dying of laughter at this point, and no one would explain to me why. Story 10. Not my story, but my brother's. This was a few years ago when he was working in retail at an electronics store that also sells gadgets, toys, and a wide selection of sex toys. One day, a middle-aged man came to the store, furious, shouting, "How can you people sell sex toys to kids? There's no rule or law about this here." My brother tries to calm him down and ask what's going on. Apparently, this gentleman's son had purchased a clone of Willie, a kit of which you can make a sex toy that's shaped like your junk. What the boy had done was that he had made a clone and then used it on himself. What he didn't know is that sex toys have those wings to prevent it from sliding in, and that's exactly what happened. Talk about ducking yourself. The kid had freaked and told his parents, so the dad had just been at the ear with his boy, and I guess needed a punching bag. Story 11. The adult shop worker who had to throw me and my drunk best friend out for having a sword fight with those hand-shaped feisty sex toy. We were so drunk. Story 12. My absolute favorite story is this. One day, a small, nerdish, effeminate college-age man comes into the shop. I greet him with the normal, "Hi, welcome. Let me know if there is anything I can help you with." He doubles back and says, "Yeah, okay. I need your help. I'm trying to decide if I'm gay or not, so I'm looking for something to put up inside." I am stunned for a second because this guy is so serious. I tell him, liking things up your inside doesn't make you gay. Being attracted to people of the same gender makes you gay. I was like 22. I think I thought I was going to change this guy's life with this epiphany. He stood his ground. Nope. I need to see if I like things up inside. So I walk him over to the sex toys section where we sold a very nice toy starter kit. It came with 4 or 5 graduated sizes of toys, and it was my go-to recommendation for any person looking to try inside for the first time. I give him the whole spiel, and then he looks at the price. I'm trying to remember now, but it couldn't have been more than $35 or $40. He said it was more money than he wanted to spend on something he wasn't sure if he was going to like. I show him the little cheap sex toy. No, it's still not right. Well, I was at a loss for what he wanted and needed to help another client, so I left him. He wanders over to the bachelorette gift section of the store, picks something up and comes to check out. He puts a junk-shaped water gun, probably 5 inches wide and 15 inches long, not to mention made out of the cheapest plastic that a toy can be made out of and not fall apart hanging on the shelf, on the counter. I look at him for an explanation before I ring him up. This is it. This is perfect. This is the worst idea I've ever seen in my life. No, I know this is what I want. Okay, but do not come back here and complain when this thing breaks inside of you. He laughed a laugh that made me realize that he didn't believe for 1 second that this was a bad idea. Story 13. Not employee, but customer. I just turned 18 years old and went off to college in the big city. I go to the nearest local porn store because they have a huge XX arcade sign on the side. I go in all excited to the back room to try out this XX arcade. It was not X-rated Mortal Kombat or Zelda. I was so disappointed. My roommates made fun of me for weeks. Story 14? I wonder if I'm someone's favorite story. Years ago, I had this uni project to shoot a black and white themed photograph using color film, having just watched Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. I had the bright idea of getting the biggest, blackest sex toy I could find and having some white cream ooze from the tip. The adult shop employee where I went to get the goods was really into my idea, and pretty much went through their entire inventory just to give me the perfect vein-ridden sex toy, and then went on to instruct me to buy a particular brand of sunblock that they knew for a fact had the consistency what I need. Story 15. A few come to mind, and I'm going to have to remove a few details to prevent identification. 1. A woman came in who wanted to know if we had any extra-large sex toy. Her job involved being very secluded, so she'd met a guy online who would come and duck her every so often, and he was a black guy with a huge cock. She'd now gotten used to this as he was apparently 12 inches plus and nearly the thickness of a drink can, allegedly. We didn't have anything of the size she required. So at my suggestion, she bought a double-ended sex toy, which was pretty thick, to use both ends in her pussy at the same time. 2. A girl who had the opposite problem. Her pussy was too small for most sex toys. I had a feeling that this was a bit more of a chat-up line than an actual problem, though. Despite not being attractive, I'd get a lot of women flirting with me. One even forgot that she was naked and walked out of the changing room to chat with me. 3. An old gent came in and wanted to experiment with sex toys as he and his wife's sex life was somewhat dead. I spent a while going through options with him, and he seemed happy with his purchases, so that was that. A week later, an oldish woman came into the shop on my day off to see me to say thank you because their sex life was now incredible. She actually burst into tears while talking to my colleagues because it had made such a difference. 4. A woman came in looking for a sexy going-out outfit for a big dance festival, and she wanted to make her recently ex-BF envious. Her 2 friends were impatient, showing her these outfits which were totally covering her up and generally being junks. I suggested to them that they head off, and the woman could phone them when she was done, as she could be a while. So thankfully, they took off. This woman had been properly run down by her ex, and her friends were no different. I explained to her that her friends knew that she had a better figure and were trying to not be outshined by her, and that she should try on the outfit she particularly liked, despite her friends having said that it would look terrible on her. She sheepishly said that it wouldn't suit her, but I disagreed, so she tries it and loves it. At nearly 6 foot, with a size 8, us size 4 body, and huge chest, she was beaming at how great she looked, so she bought the outfit. I had a chat with her about how she needed to value herself because she was hot-ass and really a sweet person, but she was surrounded by people putting her down. She came back after the festival to say that she'd realized her friends were Jeets. Her ex was trying it on with her, but she'd told him to drop dead and was starting a new chapter. Story 16. One time an old lady came in looking for a big sex toy for her. She asked me how much the red sex toy on the wall was. I had to tell her that was the fire extinguisher. Story 17. Right out of high school, I started working the night shift. Long time ago. This girl came in that graduated 2 years before me. Was totally cracked out. I watch her odd behavior as she walks around the store. When she went to leave, I noticed she had a bulge in her pants. I stop her at the door and confront her. She reacts with, "What are you talking about? I'm not stealing?" My response, "Well, you didn't have a junk when you walked in and now you do?" She pulled it out, threw it across the store and ran. I saw her pic shortly after that in the local mugshots paper. She was arrested for shoplifting. Story 18. Not an employee, but was in an adult shop in Provincetown, Ma, the gay capital of the East Coast for those who don't know, and walking around the shop. Everything is neatly arranged on shelves, except for one item, which is on a stand isolated from everything else. Ask employee what it is, and he explains that it is this month's featured sex toy, and that it is special because it has a bunch of different settings and is controlled by a remote. Employee then shares that he moonlights as a bartender at a gay bar, the kind where guys are giving each other BJ in the corner, and that sometimes while he works, he has the sex toy in and gives the guys at the bar the remote. He said he gets a lot of tips. I said, "What kind?" Story 19. Not me, but my girlfriend's story. A customer came in and she said she never had pleasure, and she was told that some women just never have pleasure. She didn't buy anything besides condoms and then left. 2 days later, she comes back in with her boyfriend. The boyfriend is in a big huff, yelling, "Tell her that some women just don't have pleasure," as he was throwing stuff around the room and talking about how his manhood was being insulted and how he was going to show everyone in the shop how big he is. After he finally left, he peed all over my girlfriend's car. Story 20. I worked a local shop for about 8 months as my first job ever after graduating high school. I had planned to study psychology and become a sex therapist. So for me, this was like getting my running start for the real deal and a lifelong career in awkward conversations. Anyway, it was very rare that 2 employees worked the shop together in a shift. But since I was working my first night shift, I was working with one of my favorite coworkers on a 6 a.m. night shift. Let's call her Ruby. So Ruby and I are about an hour to close, looking at a decent night's work and no lame or rude customers. Pretty good night for us. It was about to get better. In walks 3 people, high, and you could see it a mile away. The 2 men in their late 20s were wearing large pimp hats, lined with zebra print faux fur, and the woman in her early 20s as well, wearing strings of party beads around her neck. They inform us they're getting ready to have a party with tons of substances, and there's going to be group sex that they need supplies for. I show the woman to the group sex area. They proceed to tell me how these would be great for their night, and I attempt to close the deal on the sale. It's important to note that at this time in my life, I had just come to terms with being a pansexual woman and was still very shy about my attraction to women. The woman stops me mid-conversation to invite Ruby and I to the party because she would personally like to get to know me. I inform her that I am in a very serious relationship with a man currently and would be declining in respect of my partner. She pouts and asks me, "Are you strictly junks, babe?" I tell her that I am in fact attracted to women, but in order to make her feel better, I tell her I am specifically attracted to tattooed women, which is not a lie, and I assume this will throw her off my trail because she appears to not have any tattoos. Boy, was I wrong! She then proceeds to lift her shirt and show me her under and side boobs where a long vine tattoo reaches from what looks like her belly and bikini region all the way up and around her breasts. "See, I am your type. Please come home with me." I am bright red. Ruby is laughing her ass off because she has seen the entire show from behind the shop counter. The boys are trying to coax me into ducking their friend. I honestly don't know what to do at this point. Do I kick her out? Do I enjoy the view? It's all so very tempting. No. I kindly tell her to put her shirt down, and I tell this sky-high woman that she is very beautiful and tempting as I try to politely reject her offer again. They purchase some party supplies, and we send them on their way. But they don't leave before the tattooed babe gives me a hug goodbye and I wish them a safe night. Story 21. I worked at a tiny adult boutique in my city's downtown. Because the store was so small, I ended up having full-on conversations with the few people that trickled in over the course of the day. Here's a few of my favorite stories. 1. A middle-aged couple came in looking for a junk ring and a bullet, small sex toy. When they were looking at our remote-controlled bullets, they saw one that they recognized. They went on to tell me that the group sex that they were a part of had bought about 8 of them for an activity they had planned. This activity entailed giving each of the ladies in the group a bullet and then all the men picking a random remote. The plan was that throughout their evening, the guys would use the remotes to activate the bullets that were inside the women without warning. Pretty creative plan, right? Except what they didn't realize was that every remote and every bullet was exactly the same. So any bullet that was in range of the remote that was being used would activate. Apparently, the night still went well, just not quite as planned. 2. An older French woman came in, probably in her early 70s. Super sweet woman. I asked if I could help her find anything. She informed me that her daughter had bought her a vibrating sex toy, but it had died, so she wanted a new one. I showed her what we had, and she ended up choosing a very high-end one. At checkout, she realized that she'd like some lube as well, so I helped her find the best one for her needs. Once we were back at the register, she again stopped me because she saw some female stimulation oil that she wanted. After that, she felt she had what she needed and finished her purchase, which came out to about $400. She thanked me over and over again, hugged me, and practically giggled her way out of the store. I seriously hope to be like her at that age. Story 22. While not a sex toy shop, I did work for about 6 months at an automotive battery place that was right across the street from one. The number of people that would come in and say something to the effect of, "Oh, car batteries," then leave was hilarious at first, then just annoying. Story 23. I was an Escort house receptionist, but I have to share this one. We had one girl who was very stupid. Not just language barriers, she was thick. Admirable for making so much money with what was indeed hard work. 12-hour shifts, 5 days a week, looking flawless always. Considering she never went to school and stole what little she ate before she arrived. She always had arguments with customers for no reason other than her not understanding something trivial. So one day, this guy comes out, stark naked, and complains to me in a very cheerful, polite, and friendly way that this lady doesn't seem to understand him. The argument and the essence of his issue are irrelevant. This super confident bald guy just standing in the middle of the reception room, naked, smiling, and talking at me. And I'm like, I see, okay. Eva, come here for a sec. We all ended up having a good laugh, and Eva, name changed. Actually liking this guy, or this other guy, also Thick Eva's customer. He wasn't funny. He was just plain duck-tarted and of the type I want to smash through our big window. He came out dragging her with him. They were both cursing and angry. And I tell him if he doesn't unhand the lady, I'm calling police. As he keeps threatening and cursing and accusing Eva of defrauding him, No way, she's too dumb for that. My money is on another misunderstanding. He unhands her, but demands I do indeed call the cops. Cool. They come and ask for everyone's ID. He deadpans, don't have one. Cop, are you in this country legally? John, no, why? Cop, in handcuffs he goes. I gave a little wave like, idiot, what an idiot. Moral of the story, escorts are humans. You do not ever get to abuse them. Their no is as valid as anyone else's. Story 24, not my story, but my ex-boyfriend. He worked night shift, midnight to 8 a.m., at a chain adult store for about a month before he decided he couldn't do it anymore, which broke my heart because the employee discount was amazing. But by the time he quit, I had all the toys I could want anyway. His best story was about the person who had bought a sex toy the day prior and came in the next day to complain that it was broken and that they needed a replacement. Since store policy is basically once it leaves the store, it's the customer's problem. I'm pretty sure it's a health code thing, and there's a sign about the policy by the exit to the store. He told the guy that he couldn't do anything for him. Of course, this is the kind of person that will bring a used, broken sex toy back to the store. This definitely wasn't good enough. First, the guy tried to say that it was sold to him broken, which my ex knew was bullcrap because before a device leaves the store, it's tested at the counter to make sure it works. By tested, I mean they put batteries in it and turn it on for a few to make sure it buzzes before I get weird responses. So the guy admits that he gave it a try, and it worked for a few until it shorted out. Being a decent person, and also an idiot, he decided to try and figure out why the sex toy broke. So he checks the batteries compartment first. Well, where you're supposed to put in two AA batteries side by side. The guy had crammed a rectangle battery. I think they're called a C or D cell, but I've been wrong before. Anyway, since the battery was basically the same shape and size as the two AA's would be, it worked long enough for the guy to start having fun, but not finish. And so he insisted that my ex owed him in pleasure, because it certainly wasn't the customer's fault for cramming the wrong battery into the toy. Story 25. I worked at an adult shop from 19 to 21, and it was interesting to say the least. We were open till midnight on the weekends, and about 15 minds before closing, this normal-looking woman in a tracksuit comes in. She's holding a leash with a diaper-clad man on the end. What shocked me more than anything was the dude had sandals with socks on. I told the couple they had to leave because pants were required in order to shop. Guy turns beet red. I'm thinking getting humiliated is his thing. The lady smirks and off they go. I had so much fun at that job. Story 26. Okay, I'm glad you asked. I worked only 3 weeks and then I got fired. Why did I got fired? Here's the story. And English isn't my mother language. I was a student at the time and I saw the announce. I thought it would be funny to have that job like that once in my life, so I applied and got in. I thought I would be working alone, but in the first day, a guy was there with me. He told me he was Fred's, the owner, brother. Sometimes he would be only there for 2 hours. I did all the cashier work, and he was the commercial part. So when some people went to the store, he would try to make them buy stuff. He would go to girls and explain how to use those sex toys and talk about the sensations they feel. Sometimes he would sell stuff, other times they would be grossed out. It was kind of awkward, but damn, he was the brother of the boss and he wasn't there much time, so yeah, do your stuff. One time a customer was really grossed out, so she wanted to write a complaint. At the end of the day, when the owner came to the store, I told him about it and told how his brother tried to seal things sometimes in a very aggressive way. And he asked, "What brother?" and then fired me. Story 27. Okay, one lovely day, peddling smut. I had a couple old snowbirds drop in with very concerned looks on their faces, wanting to make a return. As some of you may have hopefully guessed, returns are not really something we did. I calmly explain this to the couple, who become extremely offended. The man whips said toy, in its packaging, out of the tote bag he'd been holding on to. I immediately notice what looks to be discharge completely coating the toy and packaging. He non-chillingly places the toy on the counter, residue covering his fingers. "Excuse me," I tell him in my best retail voice. "We have an absolutely no returns policy on used toys, especially in this condition." The woman is giving me the most flabbergasted look. But this toy injured me greatly, and I should sue. The old man, to my horror, reaches again into the tote bag of tricks and pulls out what she explains to be discharge on a paper towel in a little Ziploc baggie. I lost it at that point and asked them to leave. They left their toy behind. We bleached the counters. Story 28. I worked at a popular chain of stores in Dallas for a few months back in 2008 and came away with a myriad of stories. But these two really are the tops for me. First was a peach of a lady who came in, purchased a butterfly panty attachment toy with a remote control. Part of this store's policies is that we tested everything in front of the customer before they left, so they knew it would turn on and work. A few hours later, this lovely woman returns with a plastic Walmart bag and the toy unwrapped and inside. "I need to return this. It just don't do." "I'm sorry, ma'am. It just don't do, and I need my money." "Ma'am, it appears to have been used." We only take back defective product. Well, it is effective because it just don't do. At this point, I'm still not touching the bag. It's sitting between us on the counter like a monkey paw, and I know better. I go and find the manager because nope. He comes to speak to her and she starts getting angry. I told him, it just don't do. How else am I supposed to test it out? Y'all don't let me use the back to try it out first. I want my money now. Ma'am, I understand. We cannot take it back. We will offer you a refund, but you'll have to dispose of it. Why? I ain't got nothing. It just don't do for me. It might for someone else. I'm sorry, ma'am. Just policy. Fine. She takes her Walmart bag and her money and leaves. She came back later in the week to make another purchase, but didn't try to return it. I guess that one did do. The second story was about the most flaming man I have ever met. He was mid-20s, flirting with me the whole time. I explained I had a girlfriend, but he figured it was worth a try. No problem. He asked for help picking out a new sex toy. I went about my job, helping him figure out what he was looking for and showed him different options and styles. I pulled out one medium-sized one and he was thoroughly uninterested. Oh, honey, please. Do I look like I want that tiny thing anywhere near me? I chuckle and pull out a large size one. Not too massive, but somewhere within reason for a person to be packing in real life. That's getting there, but I need to be challenged. Total size queen. I get it. I go for sarcasm and pull out the Great American Challenge. For those of you unfamiliar with said product, go ahead and Google it. I'll wait. Got it? Good. Perfect. I am up for that challenge. Haha, are you sure? We do not offer refunds on used product, and this may just end up being a decoration. Well, if it does, my boys will at least see it and know what I'm expecting. We laugh and I pack it up for him and chalk it up to a fun experience. I go about my day, tidy up the store, and take out the trash. There's a car in the back lot that hasn't moved in a while. I'm confused. Nobody has been in the store since he made that purchase about half-hour ago, and it's a private lot, so I glance in to see what's going on. There's my buddy, feet up on the wheel, taking the challenge like a pro. I paused for a second, partially confused as to why he couldn't wait until getting home, and partially just impressed. I paused long enough for him to give me a wink as he went to town. I turned, chucked the trash, and went back to the store. Story 29. I work in an adult shop attached to a clothing store, which happens to be a popular tourist destination too. As such, our visitors are mostly people who would never normally go into an adult store, but feel like they should visit ours to complete the tour. 90% of our clientele are jackasses who are there to point and laugh. It's my job to make them uncomfortable, which is great fun, but some are genuinely just curious. Some of the most entertaining customers are young yuppie couples who've read a certain book and want to tell me all about how into the extreme group sex lifestyle they are while buying their first set of crummy Velcro handcuffs. I normally just play along, as you can normally milk these guys for all they're worth. I have a fond memory of a Portuguese family who came exploring a few weeks ago. The daughter asked me to explain what our rubber dog tail sex toy was for, as my mother would like to know. I explained in as detailed a way as I could, while the daughter dutifully translated to her 60-year-old mom. We also, predictably, get who want to treat the staff as free wank material by getting us into conversations about our favorite products and what we like to use. When this happens, I take them over to our collection of large sex toys and corner them into a lengthy deadpan lecture on their use, the sensations they can produce. Story 30. Interesting story as a customer. Went in with so to get a bunch of things when we were on holiday. Looked around for a while, grabbed a few things, chatted about specific toys, and got some advice. Asked for a specific thing to be grabbed from out the back, get up to pay, then realized I won't have enough on my card since I was working the total out in my home currency in my head. Pull my phone out to transfer money, it's dead. Crap. Ask for partner's phone. It's at 1%. Crap. Had to borrow a charging cable from the owner, checkout person, to charge one of our phones. Go online, transfer money, and finally buy everything. And to top it all off, this was at closing time, haha. We did buy like $300 worth though, so they were understandably patient with us and very nice. Story 31. Back in the days of VHS rentals, I worked at a small porn shop. Every Sunday, it was my job to run a report of all the overdue movies and start making phone calls. I get halfway through the list, and I hit this one guy who has a bunch of movies out and has already racked up a sizable bill. I ring his number, and a sweet old lady answers the phone. I ask if John Doe is there, and she tells me that is her grandson, and he's out right now. So I tell her he has a bunch of movies overdue and needs to bring them back and settle up. She innocently asks me, what movies does he have? First one on the list, Slamming Granny Inside. I hung up. Story 32. I'll have the story from another side. When I was 19, I was invited to a costume party. Literally everything was allowed. Scene zombie to cosplayers. Me, having a drive of 1 hour to my friend's house, decided to do something special. I wanted to dress up as Escort pole, and went through the process of building a round cone of hard paper to put around me, glued with aluminum foil. 2 strings on top of it over my shoulders, and it's good enough to go. But my special was still needed. I wanted a sex doll hanging on to show it's an escort and I am the pole. The costume was finished, but I only needed the sex doll. I Googled an adult shop near the highway Audubon to pick one up on the way to the party and then bind it onto my costume later. I was very late and wanted to see my old friends, rushing to the store, parking literally in front of the entrance. It was kind of out of sight of any human interactions, so I didn't care. Rushed into the store, half running, and shouted to the guy behind the counter, being still about 5 meters away. I need the cheapest sex doll you have, and I need it fast. People in the store looked at me. I didn't care. He, confused and in haste, led me to the sex dolls and pointed at Storm. We'll never forget her. Cost €12. I didn't go back to the counter and just put €15 into his hands and went out. Story 33. My father worked for a large adult bookstore for about 30 years. If you live in the Midwest, you have undoubtedly seen their billboards or enjoyed their products. He was the head of security for the last 10 years he worked there. And part of his job responsibilities included properly maintaining and observing security footage from 22 different stores. He calls me into his home office one day after work, and his face is beet red from laughing. He says he has something he wanted to show me from a store in Iowa. I sit down next to him, turn my gaze to the putter monitor, and bear witness to the following footage pulled from a security camera outside of the store. First, you see a woman walk up to a parked semi with trailer and try the door handle, locked apparently as she walks back out of camera. Then a moment later, a man with no shirt and no shoes walks up to the rig and tries the door himself, just as locked as it was for her, sadly. He then is met by a second man, and they talk for a moment before pointing to the large dumpster sitting at the foreground of the video. The woman joins them, and they walk over to the dumpster together. The gentleman with shoes hops over the side and starts rooting around in the dumpster, mostly out of view. You see trash bags tossed about, and a box here or there. But at this point, I'm not sure what's so funny about people looking to steal things out of a truck or dumpster dive. But just as I'm close to giving up, my dad points to the monitor and says, "Look, I find that all three are now inside the dumpster, and it would appear that our footwear-loving friend has made a makeshift bed out of trash bags and a flattened cardboard box. Ever the gentleman." The three then proceed to have sex right there in the dumpster. I wasn't positive of what exactly they were doing until I saw her two legs pop up on either side of our shirtless friend's head and begin moving back and forth. This continued for about 5 minutes, and then they changed positions, so the guy kind enough to make their little love palace got a turn. It was at this point that the police arrived and pulled up next to the parked semi. With flashlight in hand, he surveyed the scene before him with a face that seemed to question the reality of the current situation that life had presented him with. A couple bangs of the side of the dumpster, and the three popped their heads up like meerkats. Story 34. Not me, but a close friend was working on her own in one sex toy shop. Besides some creepy guys giving her looks like, "You like sex, do you? Oh yeah, babe." One guy bought one of those expensive sex dolls. "Everything okay?" He paid. He left. A couple of hours later, same guy arrived with the sex doll all over a big plastic bag saying it was broken. Yes, and it was used. Clearly, with some fluids all over it. And he asked for a refund for a smelly used sex doll. The guy shouted he would call the police if the money was not refunded, and my friend answered him, "Oh yes, please call the police and show the sex doll to them. You can use my phone." He didn't call the police. That would have made this story really better. Just left with the broken sex doll. This friend was quite shy and naive when she started that job, but after a couple of weeks, she was talking with anyone about every existing sexual thing without a blink. Story 35. My buddy managed an adult shop, and a guy brought back an inflatable love doll, wanted to return for exchange because he wore it out. My buddy just said, "You have to buy another one." Story 36. I worked at the Pink Pussycat Boutique in 1998, right when Rudy Giuliani declared war on the adult industry. We primarily sold toys and novelty gifts, but also had a modest selection of VHS tapes. I was the person tasked with boxing up every single cassette and mailing them to our sister store in Florida. It was a long process because I had to check the plot summary on the back of each box. About a week after doing this, a friendly, attractive 40-something couple came into the shop one evening. They were really chatty, had probably just come from dinner and drinks and were feeling frisky. I showed them a couple toys, we joked about them, and then the wife leaned in and said, "We're looking for a film. It's called The Bronx Zoo and Me." My jaw actually dropped as the gears in my head turned. I tried to explain that I'd just overseen the packaging and shipping of every movie we had, and was certain that while we had no movies now, we never had that particular one. Maybe they thought this was some facade that every adult boutique had to perform, and all they needed to do was keep asking, insist that I check in the back, and would then get their movie. I could tell they weren't going to give up, so I relented, went to the back, and stood around for what I estimated would be the requisite amount of time necessary to confirm that we had no such bestiality film in backstock, and returned with the sad news. The core of that interaction played out over and over again. Not specifically bestiality, but normal-looking people seeking extraordinary things. And whenever people asked me about the clientele, I'd always say, The people into the craziest stuff don't look like Marilyn Manson, they look like your mom and dad. Story 37. Not me and not an adult shop worker, but a buddy of mine was in an adult shop with his wife one time, and as they drifted apart in the store, he found himself near a man who appeared to be alone. As he is browsing, he notices the guy is getting closer and closer to him until he gets right next to him, and the guy says in a hushed tone, "You want me to BJ that thing for you?" Story 38. I was downtown with a girl, and we walked by the adult shop, and she asked if I wanted to go in. I had never been in one before, so I said yes. We began to look around, starting with the adult film. Then we started looking at the sex toys. This is when the real excitement started. Now we were standing there talking when someone turns the corner. We lock eyes. Shock begins with a lethal amount of award close behind. This person happened to be no one other than my boss. She says, "Oh, what are you doing?" I could not think of anything other than, looking at sex toy. We immediately left, and I went home to die for the night. Story 39. I used to deliver packages for a big international company. I'm sure you have it narrowed down to 2 or 3, and you are right. I had 3 adult shops on my route. 2 were next door to each other. The first, seedy-looking dump, was great. "Hey, it's 0700 AM. Here's your box of Dilligaff. Sign this tablet thing. See you tomorrow, man." The nicer-looking building next door was way different. I'd walk in, and the old fat dude at the counter would either say, "How's your pickle?" or "Please, give me your package." Every day, it was one of those 2 lines. I had to keep a rack of stuff or the counter between us, or he would try to touch me and giggle. Dude was seriously creepy. It was like, "Dude, I'm a long-haired white boy that has to deliver to 4 different hoods where half of the front doors are literally bed sheets. I have no time for this." The third was a dump, but the old lady was sweet. She would have a pack of smokes and an orange live pop ready on the counter for me when I walked in. Story 40. I never worked in an adult shop, but the record store I worked at sold hardcore porn. So, we got some interesting customers. Here's 3 quick stories. 1. We didn't always sell it. But when we started, one of the first customers who noticed the section couldn't help but yell out, "Hey, friend's name. They sell porn here now. The good stuff." Store was busy at the time. 2. We would stay open until midnight 30 on Monday nights to sell the Tuesday new release DVDs, VHS, and CDS. But there was these 2 guys would come in every Monday night for the new porn DVDs. One dude would come in and yell, "I ate, bro. Where's my dirty films?" as his buddy walked behind, snickering. First dude would sit there and look through them all and pick out maybe $100 worth of them and buy them on the spot. Each week, almost every time, on the way out, he'd tell us about how excited he was to go try these new Escort out. Story 41. Story is more about the employee's reaction to a sketch employee, but yeah. A friend of mine and his wife worked shifts at Starship, which sold adult toys, movies, and smoke accessories. This shop always has super nice employees, and the atmosphere was always friendly and welcoming. I had brought her to work and was going to bring my friend home, but we all got to talking behind the counter. 2 guys came in and she goes, "Hey guys, how you doing?" You know, just being friendly. They glanced over real quick, but don't say anything. She then goes, "Let me know if you need any help." Still nothing. Third time is the charm when she asks, "Are you finding everything okay?" After a couple of minutes. One of the guys almost yells, "We're not gay okay." So my friend's wife gives us the oh hell, no look. She goes and grabs the largest sex toy they had and brings it up to the counter. The guys eventually bring some movies up to buy. She rings up the Rambone too. The guy goes, "That's not ours. I didn't buy that." So his wife picks it up and starts waving it around. "It's not. Who brought this up here? Are you sure you aren't buying it?" Both guys are pale as sheets and are denying bring it up. She bangs it on the counter while saying, "Damn it. I'm sick of people bringing stuff up here if they aren't buying it. You saying you didn't being this up?" The guys are sweating and are all, "No, it's not ours." She finally relents and takes it off the purchase, cashes him out and gives him the sweetest, "Have a nice night." We still laugh about that story. She is such in a hole. Story 42. I worked for a phone company. The company was always strict about employees' reported activity during work hours, and company vehicles were only supposed to be in transit from one assigned job to another. One day on the news, a robbery, or was it hostage situation, was reported at an adult shop. 3 or 4 or more company trucks were stuck in the adult shop parking lot while the crime was investigated. All the drivers had reported in as being on different jobs at different locations, but were caught at the peep show instead because the police wouldn't allow any vehicles to be removed, while the phone techs were supposed to be on the clock. Story 43. Friend once told me that he was organizing his brother's bachelor party. They had a running gag that he and his soon-to-be wife liked sex toys, so he wanted to make a huge cake with a couple on it. The girl had a sex toy, and the guy a massager inside of him. He ordered the cake and went to an adult shop for the cheapest stuff possible. Inside was a 19-years-old looking girl, probably a university student. He explained that he needed 2 sex toy, 1 normal, and 1 for the prostate. The girl turned red and looked at him like he was some kind of offender. Seeing her reaction, he jokingly said, "Don't worry, I already have ropes and chloroform in my van." The girl froze for a minute but gave him the 2-sex toy. A week later, my friend was walking at the park with his daughter and met the adult shop girl. When she saw them, she nearly fainted and ran away. Story 44. So I'm standing behind the counter, cleaning the displays, when a woman comes in with a very determined demeanor. Here is how the dialogue goes. Me: "Hello, how are you today?" Her: "I'm great. I need you to show me where your lube is." Me: "Absolutely, I can show." Her: "Let me be more specific. I need lube." Me: "Okay, awesome. Right this way." Her: "I'm afraid I'm not being clear enough. I need you to find me the biggest bottle that you have." At this point, I am very intrigued, and I know exactly what to show her. So I show her the product I thought would be best for her mystery needs. She coyly asked me if I wanted to know what it was for. I was the only one working, so I said, "Absolutely, I do." Here is her response. Well, my husband is coming home from the military, and I love him so much, so I wanted to do something special for him. Anyway, I called up a bunch of our friends, and we are putting together a really awesome, fun group sex for his when he gets back. And of course, we need a main event, which is why I need the lube. I think she noticed I was a little shocked because after a brief moment of silence, she asked me if I wanted to come watch. I politely declined, rang her up for her purchase, and went about cleaning the displays as if my world hadn't been changed forever. Story 45. Not an employee, but my ex worked at one a few years back. We shared a car so often I would pick her up and hang around at the end of her shift. Her clientele would range from businessmen to the most stereotypical weird guy, girl, but more often than not, escort. One day in particular, the hottest girl that I had seen shop there walked in. She was obviously a regular, as she called everyone by their names, so I asked my ex who she was. My ex never really was jealous and often checked girls out with me, so this wasn't anything that annoyed her. She told me in so many words that she was an escort on the down low. I made some awful pun about her escorting something. She made a face which I assumed was the result of my awful joke, and then proceeded to inform me that the woman was not an escort, but in fact her hairdresser, her male hairdresser, in drag. Story 46. There was the time someone tried to organize a group sex in our theater. 24-hour theater, a $10 ticket gets you unlimited entry for one day. Typically, it's all guys who'd sporadically come in, avoid eye contact, and occasionally try to sneak a palmful of the sample lube in with them. But this afternoon, it was one guy after another, and one couple. They were back there roughly 10 minutes, and the woman came rushing out with a haunted, traumatized expression, after which the gaggle of guys filtered out trying to act nonchalant. Or there was the guy we had to kick out of the theater for making other customers uncomfortable. He got really aggressive and asked my manager if she was a dyke and if that was her problem. She told the guy off and told him to GTFO. He did laps around the store for a while, glaring in the windows and making us uncomfortable. And trust me, you've got to be doing something really weird to get kicked out of the theater there. Story 47, not a worker. One time I walked on and told them I was about to ask them a question they've never been asked before. I figure tons of customers ask that. Then I asked where the best smoothie was in town. She burst her out laughing and agreed she had never heard that question before. It was awesome. Then I bought a flashlight, and then a smoothie. Story 48. Worked in a video store that had an adult section. The company wanted to get rid of these sections en masse and decided to liquidate the videos with a massive previously viewed sale. The prices were something like 4 for $20, which included the big box sets like Pirates at the time. One of our regular adult video customers came in and saw the sale. He left in a hurry. He came back about 20 minutes later with a bunch of garbage bags. When he got to the counter, he handed me the garbage bags, and I proceeded to unlock all the anti-theft boxes. I hadn't noticed that a woman and her 2 sons were at the other till watching me unlock case after case of adult videos. Needless to say, the manager and I had a talk about being discreet, but I was trying my best with over 200 DVDs of adult films. Story 49. Worked in an adult shop in a pretty bad town in Washington when I was fresh out of high school and in college. Toys, movies, and even a little video arcade in the back. The biggest thing that I hated was drunk people. Tweakers I didn't mind because you knew what to expect from them. Twitching, the odd attempted theft, maybe trying to get some special stuff that they thought I had behind the counter, and that was usually it. Drunks were just unpredictable. Some were pleasant, others really just made me hate my job. The first drunk I ever had to deal with went into the arcade in the back, pleasure himself, and then passed out with his pants around his ankles. Thankfully, my boss was awesome and got him out of there. Story 50. On my 18th B-Day, my buddy and I went into an adult shop for our first time. 'Cause duck it, right? I turned the corner and saw one of my other friends' dads searching for a little bit of adult film. We saw each other, and he just played it off as if he didn't know who I was and just grabbed a DVD and went to checkout. Adult shop cashiers and employees, what is the one or more things you secretly judge people for buying? I used to work at a store that had adult films, and it was never what the customers were getting that caught my attention, but how they went about it. For example, I had one woman who would come in every Friday wearing a polo featuring the local Catholic school's logo. I made the assumption that she worked there. And every Friday night, she would get adult film and say that she was getting it as a funny gag for a sleepover she was having with her friends. I would have never noticed her if she hadn't said anything. Story 2. I used to earn the bulk of my living from writing erotica and selling it online. It's not that I judge people for it, exactly, but the best-selling books were always the most ridiculous ones I could write with the least subtle titles. I ended up spinning off a whole new pen name for one particular fetish, where the stories would take me literally about 4 hours to produce, beginning to end including the cover, because people would eat it up. It's not so much judgment because everyone's got their kinks, but there's a bit of eye-rolling when the stories you're really proud of sell about 4 copies, but help! My own junk is trying to get me pregnant. A self-seduction M-preg fantasy sells enough copies on its own to pay your rent for the next 2 months. Story 3. My cousin worked at one and told me a story of a guy who would come in once a week, presumably on payday, and spend time looking at a sex doll that, according to him, is ungodly expensive. Well, after a couple months of this, he finally pulled the trigger and bought it. He never came back in again. Story 4. A friend of mine worked in an adult store. He would normally have nothing to do, so occasionally I would go in to bring him lunch and we'd look at the funny porn titles. And when a customer came in, I'd pretend I was browsing. Once a guy came in inquiring about some sex toy. He wanted to know if they had anything that could meet his size requirements. My friend broadly asked what exactly he meant. The guy replied, "Well, the biggest thing I managed was a fire extinguisher." No judgment, of course, but Story 5. As a teenager in the 90s, I felt like I was being judged for buying the tokens required to watch a couple minutes of porn in the back. Basically, you insert a token and select from about 15 different channels of VHS porn being looped. All kinds of bizarre porn. I noticed creepy-looking dudes hovering around the little rooms where one could do this. Well, one day as I was watching the adult film, I hear a knock on the wall of my room. I noticed a hole in the wall. On the other side was a creepy dude whispering, "Hey." I'm like, "Yeah," he whispers. "I want to see you pleasure yourself." I declined the invitation and got a little nervous. Next thing you know, the guy's junk started poking through the hole. I dropped whatever tokens I had and bolted for the door. Later on, I learned that glory holes were fairly common in adult shops with the video arcade in the back. Story 6. Former adult shop employee. Once had my 80-year-old neighbor, lovely little lady, come in and buy hardcore adult film. Currently work in neuroscience, patient-facing, and once every 3 months I have a patient who's an old customer come in. We tend to avoid each other when possible. Story 7. Not an employee, but roughly a decade and a half ago, a buddy of mine was turning 18, and my friends and I decided we needed an adult gag gift for his party. So we went to the nearest adult shop and started looking for the perfect gift to embarrass him with. Eventually we found it, a Fatty Patty blow-up doll. It had the fattest, ugliest, lingerie-clad older woman on the box. Absolutely revolting. And we knew we had to buy it. Thing is, all my friends chickened out at this point. No one wanted to take it to the register. So I took the box and went by myself while they lingered near the entrance, disassociating themselves with me and my new purchase. I set the box on the counter, and the young lady at the register's eyes almost popped out of her head. I laughed and told her that's exactly the reaction I was hoping to get. I pointed out my friends, who were desperately trying to avoid eye contact, and told her we're buying it for an 18th birthday party. She said we must really like the guy to brave an adult shop purchase like this. By the way, our friend, upon opening his gift, screamed and threw it across the room. He refused to touch it. Someone blew it up and it was bounced around the party for a while. At one point, it randomly disappeared, and we didn't find it again that night. Maybe a month later, I found it hidden in the closet of one of my friend's bedrooms. I guess he decided to take advantage of our friend's lack of interest in the doll and take it home. For the record, it was a very low-quality balloon in the vague shape of a human. Thankfully, it looked nothing like the advertisements on the box. Story 8. I don't judge this one, but I do wonder if people buying sounding rods really know what they're getting into. If that's your thing, then go and do your sweet thing. But if it's like a stupid dare, which happens, please be careful. The one thing I do slightly judge is people who buy the gross jelly sex toy that are made out of garbage, but we have to sell them as novelties. We advise every customer against them if you're actually going to use them inside of your body. We offer a decent silicone sex toy for maybe $10 more. You would think that people would spend an extra $10 to avoid infections, but oh no, the sparkly jelly one is just fine because it's pretty and gets the job done. No, it won't because it's battery powered, which isn't very powerful and there's no way to clean something that's porous. But sure, take the sparkly one. Story 9. May I tell a story from my roommate who worked at one? A group of young guys, all around 19 years old, came into the store together one day and started browsing. After a bunch of whispering amongst each other and looking a little sheepish, they came up to the counter with a flashlight. One flashlight. Okay, whatever. She figured it was just one of them getting their first sex toy, maybe for their 18th birthday. Nope. All of the boys whipped out their wallets to pool their money for it because they were going to share this one flashlight between the 6 of them. Flashlights are extremely porous. Even if they tried to thoroughly wash it before passing it to someone else, there would still be gunk from the last guy, and it would build up very quickly with 6 of them using it. It's like 6-way sloppy seconds, except it's not self-cleaning like a pussy. So, nasty bacteria and fungi would start growing in there and get into their junks. She told them this, almost begged them to just get a bunch of cheaper flashlights instead of one fancy one, but they said nothing, bought it, and scurried out. I still wonder if those boys ended up with infections. Story 10. Not judgmental, but more of being a bro. I worked for Blockbuster Video back in mid-90s and would always get questions about movies and such. But one question I would hear often would be the hushed question, "Do you guys have any adult film?" Me knowing what the competition carried, I would say, "Sorry, man." Blockbuster is a family-oriented business, and while I could point out a few good movies that have some tea in the scenes, it's not what you're looking for. But I tell you what, go down the street to video store name and tell them my name from Blockbuster sent you, and they will be glad to help you out. I actually had a few guys come back to tell me they were happy with the selections of the other store, but would come back to Blockbuster for their family movies. Story 11. Not me, but my old manager's partner was the owner of a high-end adult shop, a man buying anything insertable without a flared bottom, who doesn't take the receipt. It's probably not a gift for his female companion, and it will probably end in an emergency room visit. Story 12. Former adult shop worker here. I also happened to work about a block from my city's area. There was a major street that shares its name with a place of religious worship and have a few stories. A major one is how what appeared to be the smallest people buying the Great American Challenge, if you see it, it even says on it, "Not for beginners." A second one is how many times people tried to steal a certain adult star's ass. Trust me, it was pain in the ass just to remove it from the top shelf, given that it must have been a good 15 pounds of rubber. Story 13. I worked in an adult store for about 4 years. I nor anyone I worked with would judge anyone for what they brought, apart from glass pipes, but that's another story. Saying that, what people would steal was always funny. I had one guy shoplift a huge stainless steel dong and then try to come back into the store with it in his pocket. Another guy stole a sex toy and used it in our changing room, so that was an interesting day. Also, sex toy got stolen every other day. They don't increase your size, by the way. Story 14. I don't judge anyone for buying anything because everyone has their own kink, and I think that's fine. But I do judge people who are judged themselves or rude to me. I do have a fun story, though, and I like to set the scene, so be prepared. I didn't work in an explicit adult shop, but I worked in a head shop with an adult section in the back. All my ridiculous work stories come from this section. One day, an older Caucasian couple came in probably in their 40 or 50, and they asked to check out the back section. The man was skinny, wearing a white cowboy hat, a white long-sleeved collared shirt with a bolo tie, tucked into bootcut jeans with a huge longhorn belt buckle and brown cowboy boots that went up to his knees. He had white hair and white mustache and beady blue eyes under white bushy eyebrows. The woman was a little rounder, blonde shoulder-length hair with bangs, wearing a short-sleeved denim dress with a brown belt and short cowgirl boots. I asked if they were interested in anything in particular, and the man asked about toys. All of our dirty stuff was in those glass display cases with glass shelves you normally see pipes in. So I directed him to the cabinet that housed our meager toy collection with the bottom shelf housing our 5 sex toy. That's it. And they were all weird toys. If you ever come into my smoke shop looking for a specific sex toy, odds are that you are not going to find it. The first piece was a banana that unsheathed into a junk. The second piece was a vibrating pickle thing called the Guyton Gherkin. In the middle, I like to place this giant 20-inch straight-line double-ended sex toy a la Requiem for a dream. The fourth piece was a pink plastic 6-inch plain sex toy, and in the corner was a purple double-sided strap-on with a harness angled for a woman to use on a man. Interestingly, the man's eyes lit up when he noticed the other dirty toys. He had me pull it out of the case so he and his wife could inspect it. After some quiet deliberation that I tried to not overhear about it being big enough and a good shape, the man raised his voice and told me that he wanted that, but in black or flesh or maybe a color that isn't so cute. I had to bite my tongue and tell him that that was the only one as stock in my best professional customer service voice. Dude, I might have been a 20-year-old stoner chick, but you, me, and your wife knew exactly what you were going to use it for. And at that point, the color purple wasn't going to make it any less cute. I then informed him that he could look online because our stock mostly centers around glass, but he didn't want a paper trail. In the end, I had to special order him a not cute black double-sided sex toy that was an inch or two longer than the one in the store that they could pick up next week. They paid in cash. Story 15. I'm not part of any 12-step programs, but I have family that has been part of the community for over a decade, and I've been to all the picnics, events, and gatherings in the area over the years. At the shop I worked at, we had these little bottles of what was essentially nail polish remover. People would huff them and get crazy high. allegedly when they were piquing pleasure. I would sell lots of them. They went like hotcakes. Well, one day this older gentleman, who I know is well known and respected within the community, who boasted a respectable length of sobriety, comes in and orders them without looking at who I was. When I fetched the bottles, he gave me this look of complete shock and horror. I had just started working there a month or two before, and it looked like he was used to just running in, grabbing his nail polish remover and getting out. But that deer in the headlights look lasted quite a while. Before I finally signaled that I wasn't going to out him to his 12-step community, that was all on him and his conscience. I was working in an adult shop after all. I've seen weirder crap. One guy was in town having an affair with someone's wife, while the husband was out of town. He bought one of those mold-your-own sex toy to leave her as a gift when their weekend together was over. I also had a guy who could barely walk come in and ask me on my very first day if we sold VAs, which it turns out we did. Story 16, not an adult shop employee, but I do have stories that friends have told me which are coming up. I used to work in a supermarket, and guys would buy condoms from time to time. But 9 of 10 times, they'd put it on the conveyor belt, grab a random magazine to cover it, grab a Coke from the drink fridge and a chocolate bar. They would pay and scurry out. Once I saw a guy walk out, stop at the bin outside, pull the condoms out, and bin the bag with everything else. A shame, really. I could have read that trash mag and had the Coke and chalky bar on my break, but I didn't get the embarrassment. Better to be safe. I mean, I didn't buy condoms there, but that was because I worked there and figured that was an acceptable excuse. I have a friend who works in an adult shop. Similar thing. She didn't judge. She said it was boring after a while. She said if anything, she judged people on certain things like, if an 18 years old comes in and is immature, it's an age thing. But if a 40 years old comes in and laughs and points boobies, she judges. Another friend works in a gay sex venue. Guys turn up, pay a fee, and are given a key and a towel. They nude up, lock up their stuff, and wander through mazes and rooms hoping to meet a non-men to get their rocks off. There are rooms playing adult films. Workers usually stay around the office area, but occasionally have to fix the TVS playing adult film, etc., except the workers are fully clothed. My friend says he is occasionally hit on by those who don't know better, but he judges them. Story 17. I never worked at one, but the adult shop I used to frequent had this sex doll displayed in a cabinet. Scantily clad, big breasts, regular thing except the size. The thing looked adult, just proportionately scaled back. It was disgusting, and I judged the duck out of anyone who bought it. Story 18. Not an employee, but I buy a lot of product. Cashiers. We can tell when you're judging. I think the worst one was that I once bought a bright pink latex mask that looked like a pig's head for my husband. Think puppy player hoods, just another animal, big snout and everything. The cashier looked at me for the longest time and then told me she really didn't think anyone would ever actually buy it. I also used to write erotica for a living, and I don't judge per se because I'm too weird myself to be doing that, but one guy once asked me to write him a short story about blueberry and fixation. After asking him for details and covertly trying to figure out what that was, I learned that it's a fetish for, specifically, what happened to Violet after chewing the dinner gum in Willy Wonka. I'll never be able to forget about that one. Story 19. Story from a friend. The adult shop is located within 15 minutes walk of a high school. I went to this high school. Once you find the adult shop, it quickly becomes a goal to get in there and shop around. Many students, much too young, try to get in regularly. It then becomes a race of birthdays. The day someone turns 18, they're waiting at the front door of the shop before they open. The story. My friend who worked at the adult shop had to the principal on speed dial because often he couldn't get the students out of the shop and didn't want to involve police. He remembers one of the groups was especially difficult to get out, and the principal threatened to call the cops. To my friend's surprise, the following day, the same group walked into the store. He called the principal, and the group left. My friend later saw multiple posters around the streets, and presumably around school, of a picture of the principal going into the adult shop stating they see him go in there all the time. I can only assume this was an attempt to get him fired. Not sure if it worked. Story 20. I currently work at an adult store. We sell sex toys. The only thing I judge people for is when they say they don't want to buy lube because they use coconut oil. Or they say they don't need toy cleaner because they want to use normal dish soap. I try to explain that coconut oil is not great to be using as lube, and that soap breaks down silicone, and they don't listen. What can I do, though? I guess they like yeast infections? Story 21. Worked at a stop and rob that sold a lot of dirty mags. It was at the entrance to an upper-middle-income neighborhood, but in the 90s it was still fairly diverse. We had multi-packs that had like 10 or even 20 magazines in them. They sold for like $10, so I always thought they must be rubbish or mostly ads. And yeah, I secretly judged folks that bought them. Not folks who bought the regular mags, even the hardcore ones, but the multi-packs. Then a guy who came in every week the day they were delivered and bought a few different packs, and I started talking. Turned out he was an artist and would take the raunchiest pics and tear them out and shred them where the worst stuff was still visible. Glue it down to canvas and paint over it. The glossy texture of the magazines and the layering effect of the shredded pieces gave the canvas an interesting texture. I still kind of judged others, but not him. Yeah, he was a freak, but a really cool guy. I thought it a bit odd, I was 18 at the time, when a guy who was like 40 or 50 got a barely legal, especially if they had daughters. But finding out that most of the women in the barely legal ones were in their late 20s or older, I thought it was funny. Story 22. Not an adult store, but a news agency that sells adult magazines. We're not really fazed by people buying them, but sometimes it's weird. 50-year-old men buying barely 18 mags and teenagers buying the unrestricted ones and being very clearly terrified of us. Story 23. There is a product called the Great American Challenge or something like that. Was the biggest sex toy we had at the time. Thing was seriously as long as my calf and as thick as my thigh, and was only purchased by dudes that I assume hate their wives. Story 24. I work in a shipping warehouse for a large adult toy distributor. Amongst the products sold are life-size sex dolls that cost $5,000. We had 4 of them sitting in the warehouse for several weeks. Then one day when I came in recently, there was only 3. I don't know who purchased it, but I definitely judged the anonymous purchaser. Story 25. I used to work at an adult shop, and whilst there, due to my in-depth research and understanding how our products worked, I quickly became their top salesperson. With all that effort, it taught me not to judge, as everyone had their own kinks. What I do judge is when others come into the shop and try to get us to describe how a product is used just for them to end. I'm not consenting to that, so duck off. Story 26. I worked at an adult shop in my city's gayborhood, and I have a few things I could list. First off, none of these are things they bought that would make me judge them. I mean, I was selling sex toys, different strokes for different folks. But it was always their attitude, way they acted when I was selling them. For example, we sold group sex stuff, and I was also involved in the community, so I had some decent knowledge on our inventory. We would always get these doms who would ask me to show them some things, which were usually leather and handmade, and complain about how, oh yeah, this would never last long if I was using it. I hit so hard it would fall apart. And then would proceed to buy a crafty prop Halloween whip with glued-on rhinestones popping off. Others, more funny than annoying, were obviously straight guys asking about strange toys, which we didn't sell, and trying to dance around asking for it. I had a fun time messing with them and pretending I didn't know what they were talking about. The worst would be the people coming in with friends and acting like an expert but sharing completely wrong info and buying the cheaper, crappier toys, though we didn't stock any non-body safe stuff, but still. Also, the creepiest goes to the dudes who go into end to women telling them about sex toys. Story 27. The woman who works at the adult store near me has a really bias. Whenever I go in, she's always bubbly and excited and ready to talk to me about the 38,000 sex toys they have. Whenever I ask about the male sex toys, she gets so awkward and drops to this curt professional tone, like, I don't know, do you see it there? I guess we don't have it. Or, I don't know what that is. It is these? Whatever these are. Anything that a dude puts his junk in makes her internally cringe, and she can't look me in the eye. But a dual-pronged, double penetration, vibrating and pulsating sex toy, she's going to tell me all the spots it will hit on my wife in every last detail. Story 28. Adjacent, I sell comic books, some of which are adult. Sometimes a guy comes in and he buys yaoi, and then quickly tells me, it's not for me. I wasn't judging them before, but I am now. Story 29. I don't judge anyone for what they buy, just how they behave when buying it. Only one has really made me judge someone. An older couple came in. The guy was very quiet, though the wife was loud and obnoxious. She bought a toy for herself and a junk bump, erection cream, and a toy for him. Then loudly at the register went into a rant to me about what a shame it was that she even needed this stuff because he couldn't keep it up. The man had been quiet and embarrassed the whole time until he finally snapped and yelled back, "I'm 82 years old. I think I'm doing pretty damn good." I judged her hard for trying to shame this dude publicly to strangers. I had to wonder if his problem was with not wanting to be with her rather than physical. Story 30. I once purchased condoms at a local convenience store. At that time, I was 18 years old. I put the condoms on the counter and hear a female's voice behind me loudly whisper, "Nice!" I turned, and it was my current English teacher. She and I had a nice laugh about it, but inside my head, I was screaming. I never told my girlfriend at the time. When I showed up to English class the next day, she winked at me and chuckled. It was mortifying then, but it's funny looking back now. Story 31. I managed a store attached to a strip club that also had viewing booths. I didn't really judge people for buying certain things, but I definitely judged people going into the booths. They were skeevy weirdos almost always. I got asked leader questions a lot, and the old, "Oh, it's not working, can you come fix it?" Nope. One guy would come in, buy a one-time use junk ring, go in back to a booth, and then come back out and walk around. Like all the time. Also had a repeat fleshlight customer that was a famous football player. He would come to the club at like noon trying to get in, and we opened at 4. He's now in prison for, I believe, abuse and pleasure himself in public. Story 32, current employee. We sell mostly stuff on the vanilla side of things, so no judgment for what folks buy. Mostly being impressed when someone buys a really large sex toy. What I do judge people for is people obviously pressuring their partners into doing something they don't want to, or trying to return something even though they know the policy. And when we say no, they get upset. A lot of people come in trying to buy performance-enhancing pills, and we have to explain that no, we don't sell those, and you probably wouldn't need them if you had a real conversation with your partner about their needs. Folks want a magic fix for lasting longer or making their usually femme partner achieve in pleasure. Story 33. Worked at one for a while, but the only thing there I recall judging anyone for was using the tanning beds in the back. Firstly, hello cancer, and above and beyond that, you. Story 34. A friend of a friend came to a bonfire I was throwing, and he revealed that he managed an adult shop outside of Detroit. He was a super cool guy and made it clear he never really judged anyone because everyone has their things. But the one thing he said he could hardly straight face through ringing up was this 2-foot-long novelty alligator-shaped sex toy he called the Alligator. He said he'd sold 4 in the last year and had 2 more stolen. So there are at least 6 people in or near Detroit with an alligator in their home, or less with multiple. Story 35. Honestly, I don't judge for much unless you've lied to me about why you're in. Don't come in and tell me, oh, I'm looking for lingerie for my girlfriend, then beeline for the DVD section in the back and buy a bunch of hardcore bondage stuff. I guess I occasionally catch myself judging guys who come in and buy just stacks of 20 movies. Like, I feel like at that point you should probably get some help because you might have an addiction. Also, come on, the internet is a thing, and you're only like 30. Why come in and buy physical discs you're just going to throw away? Story 36. Not an employee, but related story. Before the internet, people were doing sex toy parties, invite friends and family over, and have a woman try to sell sex items. Most of the time, it would be a ladies only. But my wife unknowingly brought me to the first one. And after that, all the others. Did I judge? Yes, I did, but kept my mouth shut when my friend's wife bought that big sex toy. Or when the ladies would try on undies and want a man's opinion, Al Bundy style. And after every party, my wife would jump my bones hard. The good life. Story 37. When I was in my mid to late teens, I worked the later shifts of a Saturday evening at a local supermarket. Stay with me. And a guy came in to buy nothing but a cucumber and some Vaseline. Not judging, but I was about 17 at the time. And the event has stuck in my mind ever since. Story 38. Not an adult shop, but I used to work at a video store that had a back room. There was a couple that came in fairly frequently that would leave their small child to run around the store knocking things over for 45 minutes to an hour while they browsed the back room. Some of my favorite titles, Vrit. It's okay, he's my stepdad 1 to 3 inches also. No one ever had ID on them. Super judgy about that. It was policy to scan ID even for regular titles. And you're in here every week and you still forget your ID every time. Story 39. Former smut peddler. Everyone's got their own thing. I judge people who are ducktards more than anything else. People who steal things, leave a mess, and especially abuse the staff. Constant phone calls. What are you wearing? What kind of porn do you like? What's your favorite toy and can I use it on you? I have so many stories about the customers that I saw. I even had to clean the preview booths while I was there. Just don't be a jackass and you likely won't get judged. Trust me, they've seen worse. Story 40. Bought a blow-up doll for Buddy's bachelor party and the cashier said on a very stern and serious voice that this was final sale and no returns are permitted. She must have been through some crap. I got the impression that everything bad that's ever happened to her flashed before her eyes. Story 41. The bad but cheap lube. They ask for my recommendations, then they go for the crafty one. Dude, you have to use way more of that crap because it dries out. Just buy the one I recommend and you'll never need a damn reapplication during the act ever again. Story 42. I worked in a video rental store, which doubled as a sex store. We had our regulars that would go into the back room, but there was one couple that would come in and buy the weirdest toys and videos. Nothing strange about that, except every time they would show up, they were driving a van used for picking up children to take to church. It really creeped me out. Especially when they buy a huge-ass double-headed sex toy. Story 43. The lingerie. 70% of my customers love buying the worst sewn, worst quality fabric, red fabric will always stain, and worst size garments thinking it's an alternative to expensive underwear brands. The other 30% know it's not going to last long and are going for trashy. Story 44. Probably buying the movies. Like I respected the people, going in and keeping the business alive, the movie industry, but some guys would come in once a day and buy 3 or 4 videos. Gotta drain the wallet more than yourself. Former adult shop employees, what's your best customer? My grandmother and her entire lawn bowls team once went into an adult shop to kill some time between matches, purely because they were all curious and had never been in one before. According to her, the girl behind the counter was pretty weirded out. A bunch of little old ladies in lawn bowl uniforms were not the typical browsing customers, and she just didn't know how to react as they wandered around loudly commenting on the blow-up thing. Story 2. Only worked at one for a few months, but I remember one guy was walking around looking at the porn DVDs and started pleasure himself. I looked up, because I heard weird noises, and as I did, he stopped, but his hand stayed in his pants motionless, kind of trying to hide it. I looked down at the inventory paperwork I was doing, and he started right up again. We had monitor down below the counter that I could see out of the corner of my eye, and sure enough, he was pleasure himself. I looked up at him, cleared my throat kind of loud, and before I could even say anything, the guy up and ran out the door. Story 3. Oh boy, I've been waiting for this. I have a ton of stories, but this is by far one of the most bizarre. A bit of background. So the shop I work in has a video arcade, which is just a long hallway full of booths for watching adult film. We have security cameras in the hallway, not in the booths, so we can see if anything fishy is going down. Cut to me working graveyard trying hard to make sales goal. It's a pretty dead night with just a few dudes in the arcade. I'm chilling at the counter just being bored when a customer walks in and he is immediately weird, but most people coming into an adult shop at 3 a.m. are. He looks normal enough, young guy, not bad looking. However, he's twitchy, possibly on something, and making really awkward flirtatious jabs at me. It's nothing I haven't dealt with before, and usually when someone is acting weird, I find some way to get them out of the shop. But I'm just desperate for that sales commission at this point, and this guy is putting stuff on the counter that would add up to like a $200 sale. So I bite my tongue and ring him up with just the bare minimum pleasantries. As he's checking out, he asks to add an arcade ticket to his purchase. I ring him up for that as well and offer to hold his purchase up at the counter for him. He heads back there as I'm finishing bagging his stuff and putting back the items he decided he didn't need. It's not long before I start to hear some kind of rustling and commotion in the back, so I decide to check the cameras. This dude is straight up running up and down the hallways with his shirt off and tied around his neck. I watch him keep going for a bit before I decide to head back there. The cameras really didn't do him justice. Seeing this man cringe under the beam of my flashlight in the dark arcade hallway was a sight to behold. He apparently had been sliding around the floor on his bare belly, and he had all kinds of crap just clinging to his chest and stomach that he picked up from the floor. He also held one of the merchandising hooks we stored in the back in his hand, looking like he was ready to fight someone. All I could manage to say was, "What the crap are you doing?" And his response in the most bizarrely casual tone was, "Some guy asked me to show him my junk, and I'm not cool with that." I calmly told him to put the hook down, put his damn shirt back on, and get out. And the strangest thing is that he did. Right away. He left so normally, picked up his purchase, and even hit me with a cheery, "Have a nice night" on the way out. Now, the best part is something I apparently missed at the time. One of the guys who was also in the arcade at the time came up to me to tell me later how truly weird that guy was. He was indeed sliding around on the bare floor on his belly, but also while yelling to everyone in the arcade, "I'm a walrus! I'm a walrus! Come and get me! I'm a walrus! Anybody got a wet floor because I need one?" Luckily, I've never seen that guy in the shop again. I've got a million other weird things that have happened to me there, but the walrus story is one of my favorite. Story 4. I think the worst I've ever had was this dude who tried to hit on me by implying his junk was big, but he was shopping for ways to make it bigger. Like, he'd be like, "My girlfriend isn't happy with my junk. She says it's only 9 inches and she wants 10. How can I fix that?" And then he finally asked if I wanted to hook up, and I said no, and then he touched my arm, and I said, "Don't damn touch me. You can get the duck out of my store." And as he's leaving, he turns and is like, "So my girlfriend wants me to last longer. If I'm lasting 3 hours, will junk rings help?" Brew was still trying. Story 5. I was a bouncer at an adult shop strip place combo when they needed extra help. There was a guy who came in once a week, like every week, about 9 p.m., and got a lady to stomp on his nuts in her stripper heels. I mean, full speed for a while. One of the girls who became sort of his favorite told me all about it. He would tip very large on top. Story 6. Finally, one I actually have a story, or 3. 4. I worked for a super sketchy smoke shop for over a year. The kind of shop that was selling spice under the counter after each ban at the owner's discretion. Anyways, we had an entire wall of sex toy. Just floor-to-ceiling vibes, sex toy, and all sorts of other goodies. Well, when we sold one, there was obviously no returns for sanitary reasons, which meant I got the strange task of putting some batteries in fake sex toy so the customer knew what they were in for before their purchase. This practice attracted some real damn weirdos, as you might imagine. One in particular being a group of intoxicated middle-aged ladies who went through the aforementioned process and then stepped out into the parking lot, hopped in their car that was right in front of our camera, and pounded away with that thing with their feet up on the dash. There's so much that happened to me while working there that it feels like a fever dream to reminisce. Saw a dude get bitten by a wolf dog. We accidentally hit the silent alarm button. I cleaned out a bathroom that the owner lived in and barricaded shut that was filled with Met pipes and company t-shirts he creatively used as toilet paper. And we endured the Met heads and death threats on a weekly basis. Story 7. Not a worker, but knew the owner and would start the night with a few cans in the shop on a Friday. He told us one time about a regular that would come in early in mornings and would have a toolkit with him. He would browse as normal if the shop was empty. But as soon as someone else came in, he would drop the toolkit and act as though he was repairing the electrics. As soon as the other person left, they would be straight back to browsing, and any purchase would go straight into the toolkit. Story 8. I don't work in one, but my friend who owns one in Hong Kong once told me a story of a woman who came in one day and was literally using every type of sex toy on herself to see which one gave her the most pleasure. My mate never stopped her for some reason, but she at least paid for the sex toy she wanted. Story 9. I had a guy order some super dirty movie and didn't leave his info to call him to say it had come in. Okay, no problem. He comes in at least once a week. So, next week he comes in, I recognize him and mention his movie came in. He full-on freaks out, runs out like some old black and white movie freak out. And my boss fusses at me because I just chased off one of our best customers. I took the guy's order, I knew what it was when he ordered it and didn't judge him a bit. Also, PPL liked to come in and buy the biggest suction cup dong we carried and stick them on PPL's cars as pranks. On coffee tables anywhere, tons of other PPL will see it, and it embarrasses said target. Story 10. I briefly worked in one, and I had a guy in his 70s ask me about a junk sheath. I talked him through it, and then he asked me if I could help test it with him. Take in mind, the man was married. And I was an early to mid-20 female who had just started working there in the last month. I politely said no, and he walked out without buying it, but that one will always stick in my mind. Story 11. It's not too exciting, but we found an empty box that someone had clearly stolen the merchandise from. It was a pocket pussy. Like, okay, you don't want to pay, you're embarrassed, whatever. What confused me though was the one he stole was like $10 and there were more expensive, better ones right next to the $10 one. Also, we had a lot of people coming in for poppers, which is the slang term for amyl nitrate. I don't remember what the right term was for them, but we very much didn't have them and had to pretend like we didn't know what they were to get the people asking for them to leave look at all of the other merchandise. And a lot of tourist Indian men came in looking for stuff to help them last longer in bed. Most of these people were rich and would just buy a little of everything in the store. Story 12. A customer insisted that I process a return on non-sex toy item right away, which wasn't required for the refund. I begrudgingly follow through and he bolts. My ganglia is on high alert. Scanning. The floor looks all right, the counter looks okay. Apprehension builds as I flip the item over to inspect it, and sure as crap, my fingers are in well-placed human feces, smeared across the bottom. For a bonus, I'd been covering shifts for 24 hours, and had worked a double 6 hours before the 24. There was a lot I liked about the job, but almost immediately, I discovered that no one had replaced the soap we were out of, and that my boss, whose shifts I'd been covering, had lied about their kid being hospital-level sick and was out drinking with friends. If anyone needs to know, I coped by locking up and boiling my hands at a place down the road, and smoked and reevaluated my immediate future. I texted my boss that I quit and why, and didn't reveal which item in the stack of returns was the shat-upon one. I like to think it had to be sniffed out. Story 13. I used to work at an adult shop in Detroit. This guy used to come in all the time and would toe the line of what was acceptable. We finally had to ban him because he came in one day and started to BJ all of the sex toys. We tried to physically stop him, but he was a pretty big guy and would stiff arm us while he kept do BJ to sex toy. We finally were able to cold junk, him in the head, and he got knocked out with the sex toy still in his mouth. Story 14. I had a guy ask if we had anything with goats. I told him no. He asked about llamas. The weirdest, though, was the guy who exited the video booth naked covered in his own crap. I can still see the crap footprint trail he left. Story 15. I don't work in an adult shop, but one of the adult shops near me has a display of a sex doll where people can feel the material. It was just the lower half, though, and anatomically correct. It was behind plastic and the try me hole, which was worn to crap and black with grime. I wouldn't go near it without a gallon of Purely. Story 16. I worked at a gay bathhouse in Rochester, New York in the 90 SS. We had a phantom crafter who shat on the carpet so people would step in it. Eventually, we found him and barred him. We also had the feet guy who looked like an accountant, for reference, Louis Tully from Ghostbusters, and he would stand in his tighty whities while he asked us to smell our boots. Story 17. I mean, I guess it depends on what you'd consider weird. When I used to work at one, it was back in the early 2000s, when VHS was still a thing, and DVD was the new tech. Just to give you an idea. Most of the customers were shy and nervous to be there. so they didn't make much trouble. Some just wanted to go get off in the video booths and go home. I worked overnights, so I had to shoo the escort out of the video booth aisles, but they were pretty cool about it. I had this woman who called frequently for phone sex. If I was bored, I'd indulge her, but sometimes I'd say, I have customers, got to go. Never, to my knowledge, met her in person. The funniest thing to me were the local print adult magazines. The internet wasn't as big a thing yet. There were tons. City, state, county, regional, etc. I cannot tell you how many couples were so proud to show me their brand new ad they were finally seeing in print, shoving the grainy black and white newspaper print photos in my face going, "Look, that's our ad! That's my junk and my wife's pussy!" Sadly, most of them were not the kind of people you wanted to see naked at all. About the wildest thing that happened was this couple that came in. Wife was super damn hot and was flirting for a discount. We had an old punch register, not computerized, so I could make up prices if I really wanted to. We ended up working out a deal where I got to eat her pussy while her husband watched in exchange for a 50% discount on a $150 sex toy. We all came away happy. Story 18. It may be worth mentioning that the shop is historically more of a gay store and that I'm a guy. There was the guy who tried to hook me up with his cousin in Jamaica. We're in Canada. He was FaceTiming him and showing him our wall of sex toys when he saw me and started asking where the sex toy were, how big I can personally take it, and whether I'd like to fly to Jamaica to have fun with his cousin, whose junk was far bigger than my indicated preference. Also, I think the cousin was pleasure himself to me over FaceTime. They also didn't realize I was an employee until midway through the conversation. This was at the beginning of my very first shift. Before the person training me got to the store, and it was literally my first interaction with a customer there, and in retail in general. So it set a bit of a precedent. There was the guy who casually said, out of the blue and with no contextual relevance, "You know what I'd really like? To end on your face. Ha 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 ha." And just laughing like it was the funniest joke in the world, and then apologizing immediately for the inappropriate comment. During Pride weekend, one guy by the underwear section was glancing left and right somewhat nervously and feeling into his pants. It looked like he was stealing something, so I approached him and asked if I could help him with anything. Turns out, he wanted someone to reach inside of him and read out what size his underwear was. I did it because I didn't think I'd mind, and I didn't want to send him to our only fitting room with a huge crowd in the store, Pride being the busiest time of year for us. His butt was clammy and sweaty. I don't think I've ever felt regret as immediate as that. Story 19. My first job was in an adult shop. I think the weirdest to me was an old man with a cane who could barely walk, bought like 4 stacks of spanking mags. Then also, the time there were college girls traveling around in a circle through the store. It was a very, very small store, too. The last I can remember is a mom came in and had us open a ton of sex toy to see how she felt about them. She wanted to get one for her daughter and made sure it was cheap but strong. That's all I can remember. Story 20. Had a friend who for a time worked in an adult shop. She hated it because of the gross customers who would frequent. Often a person would ask about recommendations as if she had tried everything in the store, or even ask if they could try it. No crap, someone would walk up to the counter with a sex toy and ask if they could try it or ask her if she has. She said the worst of it was this creepy older guy who liked to buy large sex toy, and when she saw him for the first time, he asked if he could try it out quick. Nasty. Story 21. Had this girl come in with a group of friends and decided it'd be funny if she took a sex toy and pleasure herself sleeve display model and jammed them together using a brand new bottle of our most expensive silicone lube. Needless to say, we kicked her whole group out pretty damn quickly. Story 22. So I worked at an Ann Summers, so it's a sort of adult shop light. But we did sell sex toys, so I have a few stories. The first is the least impressive. Basically, a wankstain who I'd worked with at a job before would come in every once in a while and try to embarrass me. But he would try and embarrass me by asking me advice for underwear and stuff for his girlfriend. Like, dude, I literally sell sex toys. And you think I'm going to get flustered by a bra? Sure. A woman came into the shop and told me that her husband likes a sex toy up inside of her. Okay, sure. Story 23. Ran an adult theater bookstore in the late 1970s. We were still semi-legal. The city, San Fran, couldn't shut us down, First Amendment, but also denied adult businesses permits to operate. Every election year in mid-October, SFPD came in, and we'd have to close down for the day. So cops arrive, have me shut off the film, and accompany me into the theater to clear out the customers. There were only 2, and one had his junk in his hand, looked up to see a cop staring at him and turned pale. I assured him that he wasn't in trouble. We just had to close for the day, and the cop walked him out. His gait was none too steady. Out of fear, I assumed that he was being busted for public pleasure himself. Story 24. We used to have an adult theater in the back. I can sit on my chair behind the register and see the entrance to it off of the back hallway in a mirror behind some water pipes. We had this one creepy guy who would come in nearly every day and pay to go to the back. He would spend nearly half his time standing in the doorway and staring at whoever was working. Just stand there and stare. If you weren't behind the register and thus out of sight of the mirror, he would come into the store part, then jump when he saw you in the cage or whatever, and act real interested in the porn vids. I always worried that he was just waiting to jump one of us and wear our skin or something.